And we are now going to get ready to move on to something we haven't done so far. We've done a panel and 2 talks. Now we're going to have a workshop with Tim Lebon. There he is. And I'm going to give him a brief introduction and then turn it over to him. So Tim is a member of the Modern Stoicism team, focusing on research and assessment. He is our numbers guy, and you may have seen his many Stoic Week reports and SMRT reports. He's part of the process of demonstrating that this stuff actually bears benefits for people, and sometimes some rather surprising conclusions, like the importance of zest. As Tim talked about, it was 3 Stoicons ago in his presentation. Tim is also a senior CBT psychotherapist in the NHS and a CBT therapist and Stoic life coach in private practice. He has 2 books, Wise Therapy and Achieve Your Potential with Positive Psychology. He's also working on a new book on Stoicism, 365 Ways to Be More Stoic, which will be published in the coming year. And the workshop is connected with that. So with no further ado, I turn you over to my colleague, Tim Lebon.
Thank you very much, Greg. And great to see you all. Can you see and hear me okay, first of all?
Yes.
So the topic is Stoic Success Stories, and the success of this depends very much on you, gentle viewer, because we're going to hear a lot about practical Stoicism today, and this is going to be a little bit different because it's going to ask you to take part in a breakout group and also to think about your own experience of Stoicism. And if no one is willing to do that, then that is not under my control. So I'm asking you in this hour to kind of really engage with what we're doing, because I think it will help everyone. So I'm going to give a quick shout out to Stoic Week 2021 in a minute. But first of all, what are we going to do today? So this is the program. I'm not going to go through it all, but we're going to start off with an intro from me for 15 minutes, breakout groups for 15 minutes, and then 30 minutes when we're going to get back together. And it'll be what I hope is a really good learning together experience, gathering together. The plan is 1 story from each of the breakout groups that is going to really illuminate Stoicism. Actually, I hope it nicely builds on that excellent talk from Catherine. Someone was talking about Stoic fables in the chat. So these are Stoic real-life stories. How does that sound? So quick shout out for Stoic Week, which I'm delighted to say I'm facilitating with Eve Riches this year. So we're standing on the shoulders of giants who've facilitated it before. But what Eve, and not just those 3 giants, I'm talking about people like John Sellers and Donald Robertson, we are trying to make it as accessible as possible this year. So as simple as possible, but no simpler. So if there's people who think, oh, they'd love Stoicism, but maybe it's a bit too academic or difficult for them, tell them about Stoic Week this year, because we're really trying to simplify the language, for instance, and also have it as a recording. It's going to be available. And new for this year, Stoic Week for students. So if you're a teacher or a parent, then it's a new resource that's been written by Brittany and Eve and Amy, and we hope it's going to be really useful. So you can sign up for that separately from Stoic Week. All that starts October the 18th. So on to Stoic Success Stories. So what is a Stoic success story? Well, I'm defining it simply as any situation where a knowledge of Stoicism, or even being Stoic without realizing it, has helped you and other people. So as Kai was pointing out, Stoicism isn't purely self-help. It's probably not mainly self-help. It's an ethical philosophy to help us be better human beings, or the best version of ourselves, as I sometimes like to put it. The relevance of those 4 pictures will become obvious later. So why? Why should, I've asked you to kind of participate fully in this workshop. Why should you do that? Why not just go up and make a cup of tea or just tune out? Well, these are 4 good reasons. So we have in the Stoic evening meditation, which I'm sure many of you know about and have done, part of it is, what have I done well? What virtue have I shown today? And praising yourself for showing that virtue. I'm going to be giving links to various videos and articles. That's an article I think explains it particularly well. So why this one particular bit of Stoicism out of all of the other things that we have in Stoic Week, for instance? Well, as Greg pointed out, I've written a book on positive psychology, which is full of evidence-based ideas about what actually helps with well-being. And one of the simplest, but also one of the most effective ideas that has been tested out is the what went well, otherwise known as the 3 good things exercise. So this is nothing, when it's presented in the positive psychology literature, they don't mention Stoicism, but actually it's quite similar to what Epictetus and Seneca, for instance, were recommending, or at least it's a little capsule of it. So this is the 3 good things exercise. Jot down 3 things that went well in the last 24 hours. And the second part of it is, what did you do that helped contribute to that outcome? Okay, so the research finds that if you do that exercise for each day for 1 week, it's quite likely that your well-being would improve, and it will stay improved 6 months later. And even people with moderate depression, it's been found that very often their depression drops. So that's interesting, isn't it? So third reason is, and I'm borrowing this from Justin Stead, the founder of the Aurelius Foundation. He loves this expression, you may already be a Stoic and not know it. So the idea is that there may be things we've done in our life that are in line with Stoicism. We haven't necessarily kind of framed it as us being Stoic at the time, but it might be helpful for us to take stock of that and realize, aha, that's when I was exemplifying Stoicism. So it encourages us to be Stoic, virtue of courage there. And it adds to our knowledge of when we're Stoic, that's wisdom. And the 4th reason, and probably my favorite reason the reason I chose it in this workshop today, is that we can actually learn from each other. And we learn from stories, like that marvelous presentation from Catherine, stories. And I've just been to 2, so I've only been to 2 face-to-face conferences just after and before the COVID pandemic. And they're both connected with the Aurelius Foundation, and really good experiences, both of them. The thing I remember most, or that I probably will remember most in a year's time, are the stories. So Andi Small told a story about how, as a prison officer, he'd introduced Stoicism to a prison, and he told us about one prisoner in particular who'd been very positively impacted by it. Then a couple of weeks ago, the man himself, the ex-prisoner, came and told us about his experience. And I think those stories, because they're real life and they're quite vivid, they're very memorable. So if we remember our own and other Stoic success stories, I believe that will be very effective and helpful for us. So we are going to be thinking of our own Stoic success stories, I hope, in a few minutes. So I'm going to give you some examples in a little framework, but just to prime you, I'm going to ask you to start thinking of your own Stoic success story. A few tips: keep it light. So this is not therapy. This is not, I don't want you to recount some deep trauma. I mean, I'm not saying Stoicism can't be helpful for those, of course it may well be, but not for this workshop, please. Keep it short. So something that you can tell to other people in 2 minutes. And I'm going to give it a go with the 4 examples I give to see whether I can keep to that 2-minute rule. and something that you're prepared to share, preferably, both in the breakout group and to the larger group. Now, there's no obligation for you to share these at all. If you don't want to share anything, that's absolutely fine. And if that's the case, just think of a Stoic success story for your own benefit. So here's a framework. You'll hear many frameworks for Stoicism today. You've already heard people say that dichotomy of control was just Epictetus. Nevertheless, I've included in this version of Stoicism made simple. So I'm just going to run through this very quickly, because you think, oh, Tim's asked us to have a Stoic success story. What does he mean? What? Now, many of you may know a lot about Stoicism, and so you'll just be able to. So the challenge for you is to just choose one of dozens you could choose. Some of you may be new to Stoicism, so this kind of few minutes of the presentation will be most relevant to those of you who are thinking, what would a Stoic success story look like? So dichotomy of control. Some things are up to us, but mainly that means our attitudes, our judgments, and our actions, and the rest are not. The past, other people, wealth, the outcomes of our actions. Remember the Stoic archer metaphor. So controlling the controllables is one way of putting this as well. So you could think of examples where dichotomy of control has been of value to you and others. Second principle is virtue. People have talked a lot about the virtues today, and the four main virtues. And I loved it that I think it was Chris explained that this is not kind of four of many. These are four which outline all the other virtues, all the other possible virtues. So each virtue will be in one category. So be it wisdom, courage, self-control, or justice. So think of a time when you have used the virtues. Third idea is Stoic progress from the Procopton towards the sage. Note that word towards. So Procopton means someone who is making progress. We're not there yet. And the sage, as rare as the Egyptian phoenix, as I think it was Seneca said. So we're probably not there. None of us are probably there. But the idea is that we try to make progress. That's really what Stoicism is largely about. And it's an ethical journey. It's not just a kind of success in making money or having a better job. It's an ethical process. And oikeiosis is this untranslatable word, which is the idea that we start off being rather selfish, and it's as if we recognize other people are like us, and we move towards being more ethical as we mature. And the Stoics think that is a natural process. So that's the third idea you could think of, is how have I changed in my life? How have I progressed? Even if you're not there yet. And the fourth idea is Stoic practice, which is, so we've got ideas from Stoic Week, for instance, about morning and evening meditations, Stoic reading, Stoic journaling. But the idea is that Stoicism is not just something you read about, it's something you practice day to day, moment to moment. And so there's lots of ways you can practice Stoicism. I just picked out 4 ideas that might be helpful when you're thinking about your own Stoic success stories. So one idea is the idea of a Stoic challenge. Anything you face could be seen as a Stoic challenge. So for instance, if my internet broke, that wouldn't be a disaster, it would be a Stoic challenge. Everything has 2 handles. The idea that there are at least two ways of looking at things, and one of those is probably more helpful than the other. The obstacle is the way, Ryan Holiday, but originally Marcus Aurelius. The idea that sometimes something that looks really bad can turn out to be something, if not to our advantage, then at least something that can help us be a better person, or something we can learn from. And being a good role model. How can we be a good role model for others? Would be another element of positive Stoic practice. So look, this isn't the entirety of Stoicism. I really just put this up there to kind of give a little nudge for people if you're struggling for a Stoic success story. But if it's another part of Stoicism that isn't mentioned here, then feel free to draw on that for your Stoic success story. So I wanted to give you some examples, some old and some very recent. So we have first example from the very beginnings of Stoicism. And a little shout out for my friend and colleague, Chuck Ciprani, if you're here, Chuck, hope you're doing well, who's written a book called A Fortunate Storm, The Improbable Story of Stoicism. So you probably know this story, but Zeno was a prosperous trader. He got shipwrecked, he lost nearly everything, and he went into, or he was kind of pinpointed towards a bookshop, and he kind of got hold of something about Socrates, kind of got involved with the Cynics a bit, but eventually created what we now know as Stoicism. And why is this a Stoic success story rather than a disaster? Because Zeno apparently later remarked, I made a prosperous voyage when I suffered shipwreck. So shipwreck, that is a pretty bad thing on the face of it. But it's a Stoic success story. And again, I'm connecting it with two things I've already mentioned. Everything has two handles and the obstacle is the way. Does that make sense? So you might want to think of a situation in your life where something appeared bad, but you were able to take something positive from it, and perhaps something really positive. Okay. Example 2, you've probably heard of as well. Jim Stockdale, Thoughts of a Philosophical Fighter Pilot. And in fact, he's written several versions of the story. But he'd learnt about Stoicism when he was a student. He wasn't, I don't think, particularly a practicing Stoic at the time. But when he got shot down as an American pilot in the Vietnam War, he said this: after ejection, I had 30 seconds to make my last statement in freedom before I landed in the main street of a little village right ahead. I whispered to myself, 5 years down there at least, I'm leaving the world of technology and entering the world of Epictetus. What does that mean? Well, a number of things, and you'd have to read the book to find out exactly how he applied it. But one of the things it meant was using the dichotomy of control. So what is up to me is, for instance, my will and my opinions and my attitude. And of course, in that situation, there was a lot he couldn't control, but he was able to control that. And his drawing on Epictetus at that time of crisis meant that he coped a lot better himself and was able, importantly, to be a real guide to his fellow prisoners of war. Third example is the one I mentioned a few minutes ago. So March 2020, just before the pandemic, the Aurelius Foundation gave a one-day conference, and one of the highlights was Andi Small talking about his work in prisons. You can watch his presentation there if you want. And if you think about it, I mean, what I'm doing now is easy. You know, I'm talking to hundreds of you who are interested in Stoicism, and the worst you can do is to, I don't know, put something negative in the chat. Compare that with Andi Small, who's there in a prison with seasoned offenders. They're not necessarily interested in Stoicism. Maybe they're there to get out doing something more unpleasant. Maybe they'll find his ideas really offensive. But why does he do it? He shows courage. He's trying to help them, justice. And he does it in a way that is likely to be helpful. That's wisdom. So do you agree with me that that is a Stoic success story because it exemplifies the use of virtues? Now let's fast forward to a couple of weeks ago, where Jay, who was one of the prisoners who heard Andi talk, went from being a county lines drug dealer to now a crime prevention worker at Charlton Football Club. and someone who was a practicing Stoic. How did that happen? Because Jay was looking for purpose. He was kind of thinking, I don't like my life at the moment, but I don't know what to do instead. He wanted to be a good role model for his child. And then when Andi came and gave his talk on Stoicism, it touched a chord, and Jay ran with it in a very big way. And I think the talk from Jay will probably be on the Aurelius Foundation website in a few weeks' time. It's well worth a look. So do you agree with me that Jay's story is one of progress, Stoic progress? Now, these might all sound a little bit highfalutin and difficult, you know, shipwrecks, prisons, prisoner of war. But what I want to stress is that we can have Stoic success stories in quite humdrum ways. Stoicism at the supermarket. In my 365 ways to be more Stoic, I think one of them will be how to be Stoic in the supermarket, you know, in the car park, when you're waiting to in the queue. Here's a Stoic challenge which I faced a little while ago. So there I was going for a nice walk. I'd parked my car somewhere and I was just coming back from the walk, and I found a young lady putting a note on the windscreen and some shattered plastic next to my car. That's a picture of the car. She bumped into the car, and it was it's quite surprising for one thing. Bit of a Stoic challenge. So dichotomy of control. Couldn't control the fact that it had been damaged. Could control my response to it. I could respond really quite badly by dwelling on it. Why did I park there? Why was I so unlucky? This is going to mess up my whole week. I could show annoyance to this poor girl who was probably pretty traumatized by it. Or I could respond well. And what does that mean? Well, responding well means being virtuous, being polite, and also focusing on what I could control. So on this occasion, that's what I did. I rose to the Stoic challenge. I'm not going to tell you I always behave perfectly according to virtue, because I am certainly still a work in progress. But by recalling this and sharing it with you, it's a way of reminding myself that actually, hey, I do have the power to do this, and that can help me do it more in future. So I hope these examples make sense. This is where so far you've been writing in the chat or just listening to everyone. The next 20 minutes or so, you're gonna, I hope, be more personally involved. The next 3 minutes, what I'd like you to do is to write down your own personal example, your own personal story of a Stoic success story. And it could be something that in the last 24 hours. So if you were doing an evening meditation, you would be doing this. What's gone well? So it's not like something completely new if you're a Stoic, but it needn't be the last 24 hours. It could be something from the last week. It could be something from your whole life. It could be something about your life and how you've made progress. And please don't be modest about this. This is about doing something that could help other people. And don't think it has to be something huge. It could be just, I was really kind to my neighbor today. And there's other pieces of advice as well. Keep it light and keep it short. I'll keep quiet for a couple of minutes, and then you're going to be put into breakout groups. I'd like to give a big thank you to the facilitators, and they're going to lead those groups, and they're going to ask you to, if you're willing to share your Stoic success story, then one of the stories is going to be chosen to share in the main group when we finish the breakout groups. I'll keep quiet for a couple of minutes just to allow you to jot down your own Stoic success story. So welcome back, all of you who are coming back from your breakout rooms. We did rehearse doing this, but there were one or two glitches it was sometimes hard to get the facilitator into the right breakout room. So many apologies for that. I'd like to thank Alison, Dan, John, Kellys, Logan, Mark, Mick, Nick, Simon, and Steve for agreeing to be facilitators. And thank you so much for that. What we're going to do now is I'd like two things. One is anyone who's got a Stoic success story, whether you're kind of the chosen story or not, feel free to write about it in the chat. And you can do that simultaneously. You know, there could be 200 people writing in the chat at the same time, and it will be there. People will be saving the chat, and people will be there to look at it afterwards. So it will not be wasted. So if you want to share your Stoic success story, then there is time to do it by writing it in the chat. Anyone who was a facilitator, if you've got a story that you'd like to share from the group, then please raise your hands. Not physically, but in the Zoom way of raising your hands, and I'll pick you one at a time to do it. We may not get time to go around all the groups. I apologise for that, but there is quite a bit of a shortage of time. So please raise your hands if you've got a story to share. And as people are returning, because people have been returning as I started talking. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks to all the facilitators. Apologies for any glitches. And everybody, feel free to write your Stoic success story in the chat, whether or not it's one that was chosen to be shared, because then people will get the benefit of it. I'm just going to choose some of the facilitators now to share their story. Mark, if I can ask you to unmute and share your story first, or the story from your group.
Oh, well, I thought the person who has the story could share it as Norbert.
Yeah. If you ask them to share it, who is it?
So Norbert, could you go ahead and share the story, please?
Give us a name that I can bring him up to unmute him.
What's the name, Mark?
He got muted. He muted himself.
No, I think it was Norbert or something like that.
I don't know. Mark, unmute yourself so I can hear that name again.
Oh, come on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, Norbert Chan.
Okay. Norbert, I've asked you to unmute.
Hello.
Norbert, love to hear your
Oh,
success
yes. Hi,
story.
everybody. Thank you for unmuting me. I did not unmute myself, by the way. I was prevented from unmuting myself, but thank you for unmuting me. Anyhow, my story is very simple. It happened approximately 3 years ago when I was visiting the LA Central Library. I live in Los Angeles. And it's the strangest thing that ever happened to me in terms of my computer. I was chatting on the phone. I put my computer case down right next to my feet, and then somebody just came and swooped it away. They stole it. And I mean, I need it for work. It was very, very upsetting. I mean, normally, and I certainly wasn't happy about it. But since, I tried my best to try to recover it by, looking around, chasing after the thief who just sped away. And then I couldn't do that. So I reported to the police. The police could not find anybody. So I just accepted what I could not control and then bought another computer. And that was pretty much it. I just moved on. So you might say that this is, a living illustration of, what must be done, whenever you encounter unpleasant experiences in life. You cannot really find redress or, any kind of compensation for it, then just got to move on. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask Alison next to unmute herself. And whose one did you choose?
Lydia shared a story which is a personal journey, and I think a lot of us can take something of value from this story. If we haven't direct personal experience ourselves, we all know somebody that is affected. So thank you, Lydia, if you'd like to share with us.
Hi, thanks, Alison. So I am recently in recovery from an alcohol addiction. And every day is what is in my control. Whether or not I walk into that liquor store is in my control. And what isn't in the craving might not be in my control, but the action is in my control. Anyone who's familiar with AA or anything knows the Serenity Prayer, which is just steeped in Stoicism. And I know Donald Robertson talks about it quite a bit. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's a mantra. I try to see if I can get it into a small tattoo model. And then the last thing is really the Stoic practice. Every night it's a recounting of the day. I didn't drink today. Today is a success. Tomorrow is a new life. And it kind of fits also with the memento mori, but it's just this, how Stoicism is grounding for people going through any sort of addiction. That's my story.
Thank you so much, Alison and Lydia. That was really, really meaningful. Simon Drew, call on you now. Which one are you going to choose? Whose story?
Hello. So I believe I was just about to ask who would like to share their story just as we left the room. So I'm actually just going to pick somebody and see if they would like to now. Christopher Spalletta, I believe I'm saying his name right, shared quite a nice story of kind of a transformation of somebody he worked with on a job. And so I'm wondering if he'd like to share his story.
I think I've got Christopher unmuted. Yep, go ahead.
Hi there. Can you see me now?
Yes.
So there was actually somebody else in the chat who we had talked about going. Sorry, I can't remember her name. The woman with her mother. Could we do her story? It was really, really wonderful. And she had said she would speak.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for taking care of that in the chat. And I'll absolutely pass that on to.
What's her name?
Was it Kathy who shared that one, or was it Q? It was Q. It was Q, I believe. KEW.
Hello, thank you. My name is Q. The story I told is very short. I, like many people, had a really dreadful relationship with my mum. And one day I had an aha moment. I've only been doing Stoics a couple of years, and I suddenly realized that her perceptions of me were not actually something I had to take on as gospel truth. And since then, I've just not thought about the past. I don't worry about it at all. It has totally changed my life.
Wow, that sounds like a real aha moment that we could all learn from. We don't have to take on the perception of others. Thank you, Q. John Lang, call on you next.
Oh, thank you. I asked right before we signed off, but I don't think I got a response. But I do have a Stoic success story that two people shared, very similar. It's the Stoic meditation, bookending the day intentionally so that one can, or myself and the other individual can, with intention, let's say, change my behavior and my thoughts and especially my habits for the better. To start off with an intention in the morning and then review it in the evening to see how I did. And in that way, I not only have an aim for the day, I have accountability at the end of the day, which really kind of bookends the day nicely with, personal change as being the main issue, for good, of course, virtue. And that's basically it. And throughout the day, it helps me to be accountable, because I know at the end of the day, if I make a mistake, an intentional one, I'll have to account for it. And well, I want good grades at the end of the day, I guess. That's it.
Thank you. Stoic Dan, which one are you choosing?
Sure.
I might have muted you. Please unmute yourself. Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. Our group's favorite was Brecken, his story about employment. That's spelled B-R-E-C-H-E-N.
Brecken, let's hear your story about employment.
Hopefully he can unmute.
I hope.
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so my story is quite a simple one. It's just a couple years ago, I experienced what was essentially a mass layoff at my company that affected approximately 100 of us, 100 of my colleagues. And of course, in and of itself, it's a very kind of stressful and uncertain thing to go through. But what I wanted to share specifically was how I attempted to apply the dichotomy of control to focus on what I could control, but again, more specifically, ignore what was a lot of negativity and blaming that was going on around us, because there was, I at least witnessed quite a bit of this tendency to blame, let's say, management or various factors that led to this somewhat controversial layoff. And I just saw that as sort of inefficient or not a great use of my time. So although even at times it was difficult socially to distance myself from that, I would, anytime I could, opt to rather focus on what I could control, which was, working on my resume, sending it, dozens and dozens of times, and working on interview techniques and things of this nature. So yeah, in short, it was to focus on what I could control and really discard that which was not useful, even though it was socially difficult at the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brecken. Going to call on Kelly's now. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity. Well, in my group, there were like five people who told stories. There's one person I cannot remember the name. I would like her to. She shared about the fear of flying. So I don't know if we can pick that person, or maybe that person can raise their hand. And also Katie, who talked about, well, she was really religious, and how she found in Stoicism lots of tools to continue being good, to continue working on that without maybe the religious part. So I would say those are the two stories. I don't know. Okay, here we are. Yeah, Jansani, which I didn't exactly. So maybe, I don't know, we can maybe pick her and she can, if she's writing in the chat. Lanzani, but her name is different. That's her name.
So Lanzani,
I've unmuted her.
And then
I don't know if you want to share.
Hi,
hello,
Kelly.
Lanzani.
Hi, everyone. My name is Loredana. I'm sorry for the strange, I don't know where that nickname came from. So my story is about invoking the dichotomy of control to help me keep my fear of turbulence when I'm flying, a little bit in check. And I used to have small panic attacks, really, when the aircraft would jump up and down, and you start seeing, I don't know, people's cell phones dropping off and bouncing in the alley. It was very scary. And there was this one epiphany when I realized that having a panic attack, it wouldn't help. And I would just ask myself, would it help to have a panic attack in the middle of a turbulence? And I realized that it didn't. And somehow this brought everything to consciousness level, and it helped me to reconnect with everybody else on the flight. And I can't say that I'm not afraid of turbulence anymore, but I can say that I have a handle, and I have a little mantra that helps me avoid panicking when that happens. Thank you.
It's a wonderful story.
Thanks.
Thank you. Dan Hayes, this is going to be the last one. I know some of you haven't had a chance to share, so please share them in the chat if you haven't. Dan Hayes.
Hi. So I was stuck with not stuck, but had the pleasure of having another co-facilitator, Steve K, of the lovely Sunday Stoic, also in my group. So he was actually leading there, and so I was one that volunteered for the story. My story is that a number of years ago, I was fairly deep into my Stoic journey, and I was riding my bike down the street, and a number of kids in a car drove up beside me, and one of the kids tossed the contents of a large soda glass in my face, and then laughed and sped off. And so this is unlike a lot of times when you're talking about, oh, someone cuts me off in traffic, that this was, you can try to assign it maybe they don't have some negative intent. This was very apparent that there was negative intent involved there. But I also, even though I was realizing that, I was also well, that was their decision. That was their action. I don't need to be angry at that thing because it is dependent upon how I'm going to react to this particular event. And that was this moment of kind of really early Stoic joy for me, that this thing that even someone is going out of their way to actually try to harm me did not mean that I had to succumb to that anger and to fall prey to my more base emotions here. And I looked at it okay, what can I do in response? Or what are the decisions that are in front of me? Can I run or try to bike after them? But looking at how fast they're speeding away, that was not really an option. Not to mention that it might not even be my responsibility. It's not my obligation potentially to deal out justice to these people. And once I realized basically all of my options for any sort of confrontation were either fruitless, unable to be done, or were not going to actually be virtuous in and of themselves, I just went home and I took a shower.
Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for those very personal and inspiring stories. So we are almost out of time. Again, anyone who wants to put their story in the chat, there is still probably time for that. So what's your key takeaway? Try and think of a key takeaway from today's session. Is it one particular story? Is it your own story? Is it one of the stories I shared? Is it the idea that you should perhaps emphasize thinking about what's gone well in terms of your Stoic practice each day? A little plug for my book, or perhaps not so much a plug for my book because it's not out till next year, but if you're interested in your Stoic success story being included, obviously that's something that would need to be done with your permission, etc., then please email me. That's stoic@timlebon.com, and I'd love to hear from you. And I hope you can join myself and Eve Riches for Stoic Week and enjoy the rest of this amazing Stoicon. Thank you all very much.